Good evening. Good evening to our listeners. Welcome to another edition of our program, the Guyana Dialogue. The Guyana Dialogue is sponsored by a group of Guyanese residents in the UK, Canada, United States, Caribbean, and in Guyana. Is being funded by well-known philanthropist and businessman, Mr. Dave Wright, Dave Imports. Today we have a very interesting topic. We are talking the possibility of uh, a minority party really upsetting the election results. There is a possibility we don't know. But before we start, we'd like to clarify a few things and introduce our panelists first. First, we have Mr. Ravi Devi, who's a well-known social commentator, lawyer, and former MP. Then we have Mr. Komal, who is the Chief Executive Officer of Geico Construction and a former chair of the Private Sector Commission. He's also been recently granted an honorary degree in a PhD degree from Manipur University in India. So we want to congratulate him for that as well. And then we have Professor Narayan Prasad, who is a social psychologist, and he was also teaching Texas, not Texas, I believe Florida A&M University. And then we have Dr. Ganga Ramdas, who is a former head of the Department of Economics and International Relations at Lincoln University, Pennsylvania. All right, before we start, I just want to lay out some statistics. So this can be probably a base for discussion later on some demographics. The GCOM has released figures saying that the total the total registered votes was 757,690. Now you recall in 2020 that figure was 661,378. So there has been an increase of 96,312 votes. While some opposition are questioning this, well, it's very simple. People who are 14, 15, 16, and just getting to 17, that 5 year group would have been entitled to registration in 2025. And that group would have constitute roughly about 92,000 young people alone. Um, we're not about other segments of the population who have enrolled, but just that 5 year group would have constituted that. Now, if you take that into consideration, and that will mean that 540,383 potential voters for the next election. That is on the assumption that there will be a turnout rate of 70%, the same as happened in the 2020 election. And you have to allow another 6,000 votes for spoilage and rejection. We leave with 524,000. That would mean to get a seat, the average vote will be about 8,000 votes to get a seat. The exception will be if you get a geographic seat like Region A, you can get a seat, a geographic seat without that figure. You can get geographic seat with 4,000 or 5,000 votes. So I just want to set up um, and so let's talk a little about the the list, and then we can go on to other areas and talk about the possibility of a repeat of the situation happening in 2006. So let me begin by and I ask if you can stick to about a 3 minute frame so we can give the other panelists a chance. So let's start with the former MP, Mr. Ravi Dev.
Well, I'm glad we're starting, Tara, and I thank you for inviting me to this panel discussion just imminently around the corner is September 1st elections. Thank you. So I think it's good that we start with this bloated list claim that the opposition has been clamoring about for the longest while. I think it's a red herring that's being drawn across the trail of the elections just to give an excuse subsequent to the elections to cause some kind of problem. We've seen this so many times, all the way going back to 2001 when I ran for the first time. Now, the notion of retaining citizens on your list who have registered, who then subsequently emigrate, is nothing unique to Guyana. Barbados has it. For one, very famously, Barbados total electoral list is also 90% of its population as is in the colony, and nobody raises a fuss, even when Mia Mottley won 30 seats. Nobody questioned it. So it is accepted. Guyana, let us be clear about it. That's one factor. And the second factor is the returns of Guyanese from Venezuela. This is a very significant number that will vote for the first time. In my village alone, in the house opposite mine in Iflat, where I live, there is a returning Guyanese from Venezuela family from Venezuela with at least 3 or 4 citizens who will be voting. Over in DeWilliam, in my mother-in-law's house, she's not living there anymore. She has rented it to another family with 6 Venezuelan Guyanese who have returned from there but are Guyanese citizens and they'll vote. So that is in my
Mhm.
ballpark figure. That gives us at least another 20 something thousand that is added to the voting list. So we should factor this in, and it's very disingenuous for the opposition, on one hand, to complain about Venezuela, so-called Venezuelans being registered, and then not accepting that those so-called Venezuelans are Guyanese citizens also, and they have returned and they have picked up their citizenship. So I
Right.
think that's my 3 minutes, and I'd like to conclude with that.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Now, another person who is in the ground in Guyana, who travels a lot, is Mr. Komal Singh. We now invite your views on that.
Dr. Tara, thank you very much again for having me on this program. I want to share Sir Ravi Dev's sentiments as it relates to the list. The rhetoric that we've been hearing for quite a while as it relates to bloated lists, in my view, and I think for the wide cross section of Guyanese, is no issue. If you looked at that, and he rightly concludes, that 90,000 that we've seen variance that has been alluded to right now came about from a white cross section. You've gone into some detail as to the younger generation that is now elevated into the voting population. We've also seen, you will have to recall too, that over the last 5 years, we have seen many persons from the diaspora who are now wanting to return back home and hold a Guyanese passport. Many of those persons in the past never had an interest in Guyana or even to return. But because of the significant infrastructure changes and development that is taking place, many of our Guyanese brothers and sisters in the diaspora and their children are now focusing and paying a lot of attention to Guyana and the development, and they want to participate and be part of those development. And I think when you take all of that into consideration, you will definitely see our list continue to increase. Guyanese from around this world continue to remain on that voters list, and they have a right to do so. And for that, the argument about bloated lists is a non-issue in our view. And I think we have maybe a few days more leading up into election. Anyone who's attempting to make that an issue at this point in time, definitely looking for attention in some shape or form. I want to implore on all Guyanese also at the same time while I'm saying this, is that we have a very robust system as it relates to adding people onto our voters list, as it relates to removing persons who have died. The system is a continuous process, and for that, the confidence level as it relates to the list that we've seen at this point in time is very high, and we have seen it. Even the Carter Center alluded to that in one of their press statements. So at this point, I think we the list that we have currently really and truly represent the voters that are available right now in our country as citizens to vote come September 1. Thank you, Doc.
All right. Thank you very much, Professor Narayan.
You're muted, Narayan.
You're muted.
Still muted.
You
Click
are
that.
mute.
Click that microphone icon on your computer.
Come on. There is a symbol with mute.
Yes, yes,
Okay.
I know that.
Okay,
Yeah.
you're on now.
Okay. You
Can you
can
hear
speak
me?
now.
Yeah, yeah, hearing
Oh,
you.
okay. No, what I was saying, in addition to what Mr. Singh and Ravi is saying, we have to be cognizant that many Guyanese outside of Guyana have not relinquished their Guyanese citizenship. They are residents of Canada, England, the United States. And we know that there are over 1 million Guyanese. Now, if a proportion of those Guyanese, and I know many, who will go to live in Guyana for 6 months, especially the retirees who have gone back to Guyana, live in 6 months. Americans do that all the time. Canadians do that all the time. The Englishmen do that all the time. You look back at the United States, between the United States and Israel, you have dual citizenship. So it is not an abomination as the opposition parties are trying to make of it. These are contributing Guyanese to the Guyana development and to the economy of the country. So why should they be denied the voting rights within the country? As I said, there are over 1 million Guyanese externally, but if a proportion of them, and I know I can't give you the figures of the, the exact percentage, but I know many of them who have maintained that kind of dual citizenship. So when the opposition claim that there is a bloated voting list, they also forget that Burnham in the 70s and 80s tried to do the same thing to get external people from voting. I was in graduate school at the time and I was contacted, so I can verify that because Lawrence Mann was the ambassador at that time. Now, many Afro-Guyanese might want to deny that, but I will be willing to substantiate that point of view. And so, therefore, my point is, why should Guyanese be denied their voting franchise just because they do not reside in the country for 12 months of the year, when in fact
Okay.
they are still residents of the country, maintaining not only properties but also having a contribution economically to the country.
All right. Thank you, sir. Dr. Ganga, your comments on that.
Thank you, Dr. Tara. The way I see it is the list by design is made up of cohorts of people, and there are strict definitions in terms of uh, domicile people and those who are residents. and this generates the list from GECOM. So the list that we have there uh, with additions and those droppings have rules to follow. So the voters list have eligible voters in its contents. So if you have 740,000 plus, it's a valid list. And from that, they would seek out the eligible voters, those who will go to the booths to vote. There are criteria there. So there are layers of screening so that those citizens who are eligible to vote in the election are truly the electors of the system. So those are my comments. The cohorts are by design that way from the rules of the Constitution and from GECOM itself. Thanks, Dr. Tara.
Okay, thank you. Maybe we can ask Raviji to explain about the folio part where you're going to produce evidence you're the authentic voter. You want to offer some comments on that?
Um, Not sure exactly, this whole notion of the folio. But what I like to say is to comment somewhat about what Ryan has mentioned. Guyana permits dual citizenship. Guyana permits dual citizenship. To get on the registry, the last time we used to have house to house registration. And in that sense, you can demarcated those who registered to vote. The last time was 2008. But our courts have determined, the PNC has taken the matter to the courts, and the courts have decided that constitutionally there is no requirement for residence in Guyana. We are different than America, and most of us might be familiar with those. There's no requirement for residence. Once you were on that 2008, you will keep rolling over. Nobody can take you off. That's so. And as Komal said, I know personally of so many Guyanese who have returned, who might not have been here 2008, but have now added their list. They have renewed all the forms that are needed, whether it is ID cards, whether it's and they are now on the list. So that's a non-issue. So could you explain a little about what you mean by the folio of voters, Tara? I'm not familiar with the term.
Yeah, I was talking in terms of probably Mr. Komal can elaborate on it. The folio is a document that carries your particulars, your photograph, your
Oh,
ID number, etc. That you got to present before they accept you to vote. If you want to comment on that.
well, and this again is the point of it all, that since we amended the Constitution in 2001, there have been so many safeguards built into the system that it's ridiculous. But you see, when you have some individuals who simply do not want to go by the democratic rules that they have agreed to, you're always going to have this issue. And Guyanese is going to have to be mature enough to recognize that. Take, for instance, in 1997, in Parliament, the PNC agreed that the ID card should be presented and can be used to identify you to vote. As soon as they agreed to that in Parliament, when the elections were scheduled, they then challenged that in courts, even though they had agreed to that you were now putting some burden on the voter, that they shouldn't be burdened. There should be no fetters, as we say in law, on your right to vote. And they were defining the ID card as such. Now, this was totally uncalled for. Claudia Singh was then on the court. She ruled in their favor. But luckily or unluckily, the PNC had come into the streets. The PPP had cut their term by 2 years, and they had already scheduled elections for 2001. So the point is that we got to again come back to what we said in the beginning. The requirements for voting, they are very robust checks and balances that makes it to me almost flawless. No system is completely so. But to the extent that we know of other systems in other jurisdictions, I don't think we have anything to apologize for. And I speak as one who sat in the opposition benches when I was in parliament. I have no, how do I put it? I have nothing to access to grind for the PPP, but we have to give Jack his jacket that they have acquiesced in almost every request that have been made to tighten up the system, and still we're having all these claims. I think we got to move past, and the whole rule of democracy is that we have agreed on a system of choosing our leaders so that we don't resort to the law of the jungle where you inflict violence on each other. But yet in Guyana, this has been the reality. Even after all these complaints about system or that and what have you, yet we have seen afterwards violence is inflicted. So what we are seeing here is a mindset that the PPP has no legitimacy to office because it should be negotiated. But conversely, the other side, there's no question if they win, they are legitimate. I think this nonsense has to stop.
Like Tara is out of the.
Maybe we could think. Maybe let me take.
Yeah.
Komal, you want to
So
continue?
yes, Ravi. Let me. I like to echo some of the sentiments that you just mentioned. The voting system in Guyana, if you really review it in detail, it's one that is very robust. It's almost difficult or impossible as long as you have all your representatives at those polling stations. The system before you can vote, the checks and balances that are there currently, it's impossible for somebody to come in there and vote for someone else or vote more than one time. It's a very robust system, and for that, if you look back in 2020, and that is why when you look at 2020, the day of election went smoothly. There was no issue during the day of election.
And the
The
PNC said
issues,
that.
that's correct. The issue started after the election was completed. All the attempt to rig the election was happening after the fact. It could not have happened during the day because of the tightness and all the checks and balances that are enshrined in that constitution for voting. And that by itself tells you that the system that we have currently is very robust. And like you said, government have made a lot of effort along with GCOM to make sure that all the little tweaking that needs to get done for election day happens, to make sure that we don't have anyone impersonating somebody else to vote. So for me, and I mean, when I was chair of the private sector earlier this year, I have met with almost all the leaders of the main opposition, and we had this conversation, and I think they all agree that there is very strong system in place for voting. And for that reason, it is very important every single political party who are voting for their respective region have a representative in that polling station. At the end of the day, you can determine exactly what is the outcome of each polling station because the SOPs at the end of the day need to be signed out by every single representative that is there. So there's no flaw in the system on the day of polling. And for that, I think, our Guyanese people should be rest assured that the system that is there with GCOM for voting, it is one that gives us the protection that we deserve. So at the end of the day, the result that is emanating from each one of these polling stations is one that will be very democratic. It's going to be very transparent and free. And that is why we are very confident that the process will be a free and transparent process. And for that, I think all our Guyanese brothers and sisters should not be feel in any way disenfranchised and figure that we should not be going and vote because we're not sure if the system is transparent. The system is in fact a very transparent system. And Ravi, you actually touched on it in a very detailed way just now. Thank you.
Narayan, your comments? You're muted again. Yeah, you're
Why
muted.
this is happening. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Well, I would be remiss if I don't congratulate Mr. Singh on his well-deserved recognition first.
Oh, thank
And
you.
Thank you.
and the second thing is, in this age of scrutiny, it is very shameful that the opposition is making claims of the voting list. One would recall, and Rafi, you can recall vividly, when Barnum was winning districts by 140%, 150%. Now, what happened then? There was no cry, there was no alarm. And to know that we have international observers, you cannot you cannot claim that there are discrepancies or that there are underhanded kind of dealings in allowing people who are not qualified to vote. What I find incomprehensible is that the 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 Guyanese, the disgruntled Guyanese, internally and externally, are the ones who are keeping this falsity in play when they have never whether they are PPP, anti-PPP, or former PPP. As a matter of fact, the former PPP people who have been rejected over and over by the people of Guyana, they are the ones who are more vocal. They are the most vociferous in terms of their complaints. Now, you can either shut up or prove the illegitimacy. And if you cannot prove the illegitimacy of the voting list, then you need to shut up. And that's my message to all of them.
Ganga?
Yeah, thank you again, Ravi. I don't. If the rules are followed, I take a logical approach to this thing. Let's take our experience in the United States. I go to the voting booth. I present a photograph ID. They look up the list. They see my signature on the list, my name and my signature, and then I add another signature. So there are three signatures on the driver's license, on the list that they have, and then my new signature. So the photo ID is key. They will recognize me facially and then through my signature. So I am assuming that GECOM has done its groundwork and that it has a system in place to validate and screen out eligible voters. So there should be no slip or slip ups in terms of the system they have in place. So it boggles my mind that they are complaining about the list size and the eligibility of voters when these are a priori, these are made up kinds of ideas instead of looking at the process that is there and what are the avenues for slip ups. So they're not addressing real problems, just as we have noted, just made up problems. So those are my comments on this part.
Well, let me give the viewers, and I'll
Oh, oh,
conclude here,
oh,
if I
hold
might.
on a second, Bishop. We have to go break. After the break, you'll make a point.
Okay. Okay.
Uh, yeah, we go to a short break. Okay, Rav, go ahead
Yeah,
with
the
your
point I
point.
was making, especially for our overseas Guyanese who I know tune into this program, let me talk about where I live. I have returned. I'm a returning Guyanese 30 years ago. I live in Iflat. Iflat has 5 sections. My section of about 250 houses are then divided into 2 sections for voting. So when I show up at the polling station at the Iflat Community Center, which is in Ocean View, I am first asked where do I live. A set of clerks look at their pages and they tell me which particular polling station I should go to. In the small village of probably for 250 houses, half of it would be 125 houses. When I enter there, these are individuals who are all pretty much locals. You are known. They know your face. They know who you are. Yes, Mr. Dev, how you doing, Mr. Dev? Blah blah blah. But then they do not just depend on knowing you. They have, as you said, that folio that has your photograph on it. It has your ID number on it. It has a number of all the details that you would want, even beyond what Ganga talked about that the US requires. Thirdly, and something that the US I don't think has, you have a polling clerk for each political party participating, and each of them are allowed to check you out, and they cross talk with each other, if they have any ambiguities or doubts. And then and only then are you given your ballot paper to vote. So there's all this manual check off that between me and you can get a bit tedious. You're saying in this day of digital information, how come it can be a one? We are all getting towards that desire that everything should be with a swipe, but it's not. Our system is still manual to the 10th degree. And I always kid people that it's like going to shop at Eddie Boyer's store, where after you've done all your shopping and you've done all your payment, when you leave his gate, there's a guy who checks your bill there. Meaning, it's a very robust manual system to deal with these same claims that are yet being made. We got to get beyond that.
Yeah, well, most of the corrupt practices do not happen at polling booths. It's a tabulation center, as we know from the last election. So there hardly be any cases of that. So let's move on to talk about this possible scenario that is developing. The two parties that seem to have the momentum, the most PPP, followed by wins. Now, wins seem to have some traction in some communities, like Region 1, Region 2. They are hustling to set up some base in your area, Region 3, place like Parfait Harmony. They had a fairly big turnout in Virgin Eugen. And I don't know if they have any strong connection in Region 7, Bartik area. But the bottom line is that you know, you were part of the system then. In 2006, when they had the elections, a party come new, a new party. Many of the members had belonged to your party, Roar, AFC. They came and they must have 5 seats. And I was wondering whether this new party has that same opportunity or capability. Do you think that they can get a number of seats as they did? Because and that was the expense of the up north PNC, because the PNC had won 27 seats the previous election, but in 2006 that dropped to 22, and the AFC got those 5 seats at the expense of PNC. As a matter of fact, the PP got one extra seat in 2006. So, do you see a scenario like that playing out in 2025 where Win can come in and get a few seats? As a matter of fact, the VP said today that Win, somebody told him, Win said that they will win the election. And if they don't win the election, some serious things will happen. I will ask Komal to comment on that.
Who do you want to start with?
Uh, let me get Mr. Komal Singh. Maybe I get back.
Okay, thank you, Doc. That's a very interesting question, topic you want to discuss there. In 2006 general election, we've seen the Alliance for Change made a remarkable debut, securing the 5 seats. And that was significant achievement for a new party that actually was so brand new into the political landscape that was dominated by the PPP and PNC over the years. I think AFC's success in that year was primarily due to a few things. Some fresh faces with a perceived credibility. They focused on the young population, the voting population, and I think for that, they were able to garner 5 seats. Um, and primarily, that's 5 seats. When you look at the numbers you just alluded to, even though they were able to get 5 seats, the PPP increased by one. They pretty much took it from the other parties, mainly the
Mm,
PNC. I think over the years, our voting population become more and more educated voting population. We recognize the importance of our vote, and for that, we're not just looking for a brand new face. The voting population in this country right now is looking for people that have strong track records, records that have proven to be successful. And I think that is why, if you look at the rally over the last 3 months, the PPP in almost every single area that perceives to seems to have strongholds for the opposition and the Win party that you allude to. When the PPP shows up into those neighborhoods and have their rally, you've seen very large number of people gathering at those rally. I don't think the same will happen in this election because Guyanese was they've lost the trust of new party, and especially what we're seeing right now. Yes, you have a new party on board, but credibility comes into question. And like I said, our population is not naive; it's a very educated population. If you look at 40,000 cars being added in this country over the last 3 years per annum, people are invested in this country. People have a vested interest to see that this country move forward in a way that is recognized locally and international on the international front. And for that, I think while you've seen some crowd in some of the scattered location that this new party is going wrong with, my personal view is that they will not be able to make a debut like what happened in 2026 with the AFC,
yeah.
simply because they don't have that strength of leaders that surround them, like what happened in 2026 with the PN, with AFC. They had Rafael Camraj, like I said, those guys have actually promised a lot of stuff. They've promised to be independent. They've promised to bring a new face onto the political environment. But we've seen over the years, they've collated with the PNC and they've actually become part of that organization. So the independence that they've promised the population did not exist anymore. And for that, our population, I think, voting population and population at large, are very cognizant of the fact that whoever they put the extra right now, they must show some credibility. And I think, given what the PPP have done over the last 5 years, it is a no-brainer that they've actually earned and they've worked hard to earn that position of trust to this nation. And I think for that, they stand a very strong chance to stay in ahead. And the new party does not have a strong footing to go forward to.
All
Yes,
right.
there's some one other point I want to make, which you mentioned too. They're dubbing that, okay, we will win, and if we don't win, then there could be some sort of confusion.
Yeah.
It is amazing to see how people think. If you look at these rallies that are going on, having less than 1,000 persons, and you're still telling your population or your voting population that you're going to win this election, I think something is seriously wrong with your calculation. Thank you.
All right. Thank Ravi. Ravi ji, your comment.
Yeah, I think I will differ a bit from Komal's analysis, but like I said, each of these things are somewhat subjective. I go back to where you told us to start from 2006, and I was very much involved with third party formations then, um, to see how we could now come together. In fact, all of these small parties, including what was to become the AFC, we held countless meetings. Joey was there, Peter Ramsroof, everybody had their little party going. Now, this is what there are some similarities of that era and there are some differences, and I want to look at them both. The biggest similarity in 2006 was that Robert Corbyn had been picked to replace Mr. Hoyt when Mr. Hoyt passed away as the leader of the PNC. And as Sheila Holder told me, and I'll quote her, she sat next to me in Parliament, that Robert Corbyn has proven to be a disappointment because he was picked to, and this is the word she used, to manage the PPP, and he did not do so. So here again, we have an analogous situation where Aubrey Norton has been picked, let's be blunt about it, for his reputation as a man of the streets. He has street cred, as they say, and he was chosen for that. He has, however, not chosen to come out into the streets with the PPNC. And there is where you have had this competition uh, within the PNC then, and you have it now. So in 2006, Raphael, even though he had been brought in by Mr. Hoyt only a couple years before, he had challenged Robert. Um, Vincent Alexander had challenged Robert. Um, Everybody was challenging him. No, Aubrey Norton at that point had challenged Corbyn. So Corbyn was under fire. He was not seen as a very effective leader. The poor fellow even went to law school and didn't get the veneer that was demanded at that point, that middle class veneer that Raphael Trotman presented. Raphael's dad was a judge and all of that, and he had great credentials. And I saw at the meetings when Raphael would initiate meetings of the third force that we were talking about, I was part of it, how powerful that mulatto elite was, of which Raphael was part and parcel. So Raphael, therefore, when you talk of the AFC's success in 2006, was not an AFC success, it was a Raphael Trotman success because the vote was a one-to-one. AFC won 5 seats, AFC lost 5 seats. It came directly. The PPP, as a matter of fact, Komal might have misremembered. They picked up 2 seats, not just one, in 2006. So that is the similarity I think you have in the PNC, a leader that is under attack, who is not seen as very effective, who was seen as ineffectual, and I think that dynamic will repeat itself. As to where will that vote go then? The AFC, sadly, and I've always said this, Nigel Hughes is my friend. I consider him a good friend, but Nigel Hughes has disintegrated along with the AFC. They have become what Ramjatan predicted, dead meat. Sorry, it's a tough word, but he said it and it has happened. So the AFC is not going to be any force here. Where is that vote going to go? I see what is happening here. they have given themselves this name, a group that calls themselves scrapeheads, individuals who are what we would call nihilistic. We said donkey damn, as you would say in the countryside. You don't give a damn. And I see that is the kind of individuals who are gravitating to this new force that is simply sending out and giving out money. To conclude my 3 minutes, I am not so sure how many seats will be picked up, because that same demographic has historically proven not to show up at elections time. They like the jive, they like the dance hall music that'll be playing. They like to
There
rally
is.
around and make noise. But when it comes to now standing in line to vote, we will be left to see. But I do think that Win will pick up some of those disenfranchised voters from the PNC and from the AFC.
Okay, thank you, Professor Narayan.
Doc, if I should contextualize this in terms of the Guyanese political history, one would realize and one cannot deny that the AFC came into fruition because there was the perception of the void in political leadership.
Yeah.
Barnum was gone, Chetty was gone, and so most of the wannabe politicians, if I can use that word, thought it was an opportunity for them to form coalitions that will, one, challenge the PNC, and two, challenge the PPP. It was out of that perception that the challenge began, because remember, Jagdeo was a young man, and there were many older stalwarts, like the Ramkarans of the world, who had aspired, the Moses Nagamutu of the world, who had aspired to become the leaders of the PPP. It is that kind of disenfranchisement and that kind of dissatisfaction that led to the emergence of the AFC. Because don't forget, it was one PNC, one PPP, Ramjatan, Trotman, and one WPA that came together in that alliance. And if one is to reflect, and Ravi can, and Mr. Singh, Dr. Singh can verify this, the, the, the most important outcry at that time was we need someone different. We need different from the PPP and the PNC. And so it is that reverberation that caught on, because the people thought that the promises that were echoed by the AFC would pervade the entire country. It didn't happen because, yes, there was a void in terms of the leadership, but as the leadership of both the PVP and the PNC began to re-emerge, it was able to challenge the AFC. But by that time, the AFC was able to amass a group of people or a group of supporters that were really expecting change and expecting something, an outcome that is different. Because remember, too, Guyana at that time was going through some economic crisis, not like today. With the coming of the PPP, today's PPP, there is no longer that void. Now, yes, the Win leadership is deep pocketed and he can spend all he wants. But there is also the reality of the lack of leadership acumen to run the country. people are beginning to realize that Azurdin is nothing but a dilettante. He is unqualified. So what he does is spread his money, and at the surface level, and I will go so far to say at the surface level, he might give the impression of support, but at the deeper level, when it comes to the exercising of one's franchise, the people will do otherwise, which means because that they understand the benefits that is accrued within the last 3 years of the PPP administration. And it is that realization that plays the most important part rather than the superficial gains that they are making right now. As some, not one, not two, not three, not four, a lot of the people I spoke to in Guyana have said, if money is going to be given away, I will line up for it. And so there is that expectation. You cannot you cannot merge the expectation with the reality. And I think the PPP, as long as they can address the benefits that they have already delivered to the people, then that will be a buffer to any expectation that the wind has right now.
Okay, okay, thank you, Dr. Ganga.
Thank you for this opportunity, Dr. Tara. The way I see it is that a coalition between a major and a minor party produces synergy that helps the minor party to show up, and especially if there is a gap in leadership or an expectation of change. These are the drivers that would mobilize the minor party. So AFC's 5 seats and 8.4% of the votes. That was due partly by the perception of leadership gaps and the expectation, as Professor Narayan has mentioning, the expectation of change. So with those two forces, expectation of change and leadership gaps perception, that would mobilize the minor party, the AFC in this case. Now, with regard to Wins is still attempting to become a major party. So there are the dynamics there. It's still in the formation process. And as mentioned, they are using different tactics, including monetary incentives, to become a major party. But this may not necessarily be the case. And who are the minor parties alongside Win? It's not too clear, and they may just be nominal. So it might shift votes away from the PNC into Win. But so when we look at the combined opposition, it's still one way, like a one way or one block, and that leaves the PPP seat intact. So the PPP with its strongholds, and especially in Region 9, with the low-hanging fruit, as I had mentioned that, I think the PPP is in a strong footing there to mobilize itself and and to emerge as a winner. So
Okay,
those,
thank you. Okay, thank you. Let's focus now. Move on to the PPP has just released its manifesto. Mr. Komal, what you think are the main features of the manifesto, and why people will believe that they will implement all the provisions of the manifesto as they did in the current term.
Thank you, Doc. Like I said earlier, track record plays a lot in what is happening right now. The PPP over the last 5 years have delivered all their promises on that manifesto and went way beyond their promise also. If you looked at this manifesto that just came out a few days ago, this manifesto is not in isolation from all that has been happening over the last 5 years. It is a continuation from everything that is currently happening in our country.
country.
And
And
President Ali
President
had announced a 2030 vision. And if you looked at the manifesto and what is happening in the various sectors, they're all very strategic in achieving that 2030 vision. The manifesto for the next 5 years is taking you straight into that plan that was outlined a few years ago. And it is almost every single sector. If you looked at it, there's development and plans for each one of those sectors. At the end of the day, the manifesto focuses a lot on our people, on creating wealth for our people, on opening up the infrastructure development of our country, on creating a more enabling environment for private sector to thrive. It placing Guyana in a strategic position within the region and internationally. All the infrastructures and other development in the various sector is focusing on that area. Now, the question you will ask is that are they able to achieve what they're set out in those manifesto? The PPP was very strategic. They were very conservative in their achievement and their plan in that manifesto. If you looked at them in detail and you look back at the past, almost every single stuff that they are planning in there is achievable. They have not gone out in the limb like some of the other political party and making loose statements saying that they're going to bring the free pay up to 400,000 Guyana dollars per month. When you're making those statements, you must be able to back it up by proper and prudent financial analysis to make sure that your economy can handle it. There's conversation about oil. We're making a lot of money on oil at this. Yes, we are. But if you look at the history of oil prices on the international market, you cannot place all your resources and all your plans surrounding where oil prices are today. The oil prices on the world market fluctuates without notice. And for that, if you're heavily dependent on your development on oil revenue, you can find yourself in a very bad situation in the event that oil prices drop. Only a few years ago, if you reflect, oil prices went down to almost zero. Imagine if you have an economy that was heavily dependent on oil revenue, what would have happened to that economy? And for that, when you analyze our manifesto that was recently launched by the PPP, it is one that is not hinges heavily on oil revenue. It is hinges on a lot on developing our economy, developing the agriculture sector, making our country in a strategic position where we can create more revenue generation to support our growing economy. And for that, I think the manifesto from the PPP, when compared to the other parties, one will be able to conclude that it is one that had a lot of thought into it. It was not just plucked out of the air. It was carefully analyzed sector by sector. And for that, it is one that is achievable. And I think that brings about a lot of confidence into our population. Knowingly know that the performance they've had over the last 5 years and the one that is planned for the next 5 years is one that is achievable.
Okay, thank you. Let me just ask a quick question before we go to Raviji. What do you consider to be the most significant transformational project? I know all are transformational, but if you were to select one as the top, which one will you identify?
Into the next 5 years or what
No, past. This exists in 5 year.
well, like you said, there's more than one trans, but I'll talk with one that is almost on the verge of achieving right now. The Harbor Bridge is a very transformational project for this country. We have, and Rafi will agree that because he lives on this one side just like myself. We have almost 10,000 commuters run that bridge on a daily basis, and we wasted almost 3 hours in traffic. When that bridge is completed, that bridge is going to allow us to cross very fast, connected to the
It's
highways.
3 hours one way, Komal.
Well, 3 hours one way. I'm on the state tonight, right? Um, that bridge is going to create so much more opportunity in terms of free up time for the business community. You have trucks that are coming across the river right now, banks, DDL. Those guys are leaving 5 o'clock to cross the bridge to get away from the traffic. There's so much of man hour wasted on that bridge traffic at this point in time. So for me right now, a project that has been achieved over the last 5 years is the Damar Harbor Bridge. It's a major achievement that's gonna benefit a significant amount of people, both the traffic on the road and the people that traverse the bridge. Also, the maritime traffic. Many people may not recognize it, but the maritime traffic right now is heavily affected because of the issues we have, the bridge opening and closing, and it only happens at night. Many vessels that are transiting and go beyond the bridge right now are incurring significant amount of demurrage. And those demurrage costs ended up passing to our consumer. When the bridge is completed, traffic will now flow smoothly in our waterway. And for that one project, in my view, is a very remarkable project. It's one that I think is very transformational for our country.
Right. I totally agree. I saw a press release today where the Minister of Works says that the bridge is on schedule for opening, which is probably might finish on 31st of August. But let's come to Raviji. I want to ask you this question. It's related to what Mr. Singh said, but there's an article, a letter into this paper written by the AFC, Diana Rajkumar, saying that deal with question one, they talk about the social protection program of the AFC, in which they put the poverty level is 48%. It means that 400,000 Guyanese are living in poverty. Now, that's the most ridiculous thing. But Raviji, I want you to comment on that. This
Well,
poverty.
well, before I comment on that, I just want us to not to discuss it, but to think about it. That I said, compared to 2006 and now, there are continuities and there are changes. One of the changes that all of us must take into consideration, and Komal is from my background. We both have business background. I come up from a corporation. I was never, any other academic. The point is though that you have to understand the changing demographics, and the new voter that we have in Guyana are most, like I said in your last program, are more what you call populist oriented. Komal is a young man among us. We go back to a time and place when everybody practiced what we call doctor politics. Lord
Mhm.
best, you had to be qualified to be that. That is no more. We have seen it in all the European countries, populism. We see it in America. Trump has now championed populism, where you tell the people what you think they want. And everybody has been surprised by Trump's victory. But if you follow politics, you should not be. He's a populist. He just tells the people what they want.
Mhm.
And you might say, well, man, people will think of all these other things. Well, hey, that's not how people think anymore. They think in song bites. They think with social media. They don't think like how we had to read through things. I'm associated with a newspaper in Guyana. Nobody reads long stories anymore. They want little sound bites. Very sadly. So we must factor that in. And that's why I think the scrape heads that are supporting Win, I think they are significant. But to come back to your question, I think it's very, very important, right? And talking about that has made me slip. What was that question again? Um,
Um, the AFC in a letter to
yeah,
this
yeah.
state
This
that
whole 48% thing, yeah.
yeah,
You see, that is why I get very annoyed. The
Mhm.
World Bank admitted that it is using data from 2019
That's correct.
when the PNC, I don't care about the PAFC, it was PNC ruling things. When the PNC was in office, that is a PNC data. And who in their right mind? I live in Guyana, I live in Iflat. When I came here, I had the only car in the village, so to speak, a L'Oreal, I remember that. Now every family in Iflat has a car. You understand? Meaning, who will tell me that we still have 40 years? But they're dishonest. They're not even going by data. And this is where I am very disappointed disappointed with some of these political players to use that number. It shows us that they are not serious about improving the lot of this country. I respect Komal. I'm glad I'm getting a chance to tell him to his face for stating that in Guyana there's no unemployment. There is no unemployment in Guyana. I still use the example where I can get a person to fix a leak in my roof for the last year. And I've made this claim 6 months ago. And the roof is still leaking. Whenever it rains, somebody, send him over, please. The point is, though, that we got to be real. And if you want to develop Ghana, these new parties, you have to start from where we are. If you will say that we should now be training our Guyanese for the new jobs that will be opening up, for the new economy that is going to evolve, I think that's a fair statement. I think that's a fair statement. But the point is, no one puts that at the feet of the PNC. Oil was discovered in 2015 when they took office. Every oil producing nation, there's a standard operating practice. The moment you strike oil, there's a model out there that you hire a company, and there's companies out there that do it to do what is called a baseline study. That company will then come in and look at your economy and tell you in what areas you need to train, how many welders you may need for the new infrastructure, how many accountants you may need to audit the oil companies. Suriname did this way back. And the PNC never did it, and nobody is talking about that. So the PPP, I'm not excusing them, but the PPP came in and rubber was already hitting the concrete. They had to start doing. They didn't have the luxury of starting to find out a baseline. But to their credit, for example, they introduced a local content legislation which addressed some of our concerns. And in their all of the efforts that they have done, they have worked to bring down this so-called 48% down to where I think it is now manageable. And this is the important thing, and I want to make this because I am personally, there's a philosophy in development. One, you give out people everything, but I come from a tradition where you work for it, and you then have dignity. You know how you have dignity to say, I work for it. My father worked at the Sugar Estate. I felt where I still live. But he had dignity because he never wanted a handout. And war before us if any one of his 10 children were to go and accept a handout. It's a whole different philosophy. And I think the people made a good balance between the social services that is cushioning whatever lag there is in terms of getting our population up to par. They're making a good effort for that cushion to be there. But strategically, they are creating jobs, facilitating people like Komal Singh, who can create jobs. And here I would like him to talk about some of that facilitation because I come from a free enterprise background and I'm partial to that all these people need who have entrepreneurial qualities, all they need are some incentives and they will take the risks.
All right, thank you. As the Ghanaian oil expert said, he don't believe in handouts. He say you must work for your money. That's the exact word. Professor Narayan.
Yeah, uh, Dr. Tara, I don't know which one of the questions you're referring to, but I'd like to
We're
comment
talking
on
about
both.
poverty.
Yeah, but prior to poverty, you were asking about the manifesto, where the
Yeah,
manifesto
yeah,
is going.
yeah.
I'd just like to make one point on that. You cannot, the PPP manifesto is grounded in its current and in its past. It has contributed and what it will continue to contribute. And so one has to pay attention to that. It is not the lofty ideals of those who pontificate and make promises of richness, of wealth, of immediate gains. And so, in that way, the from my reading of the manifesto, is that it is a practical and it is a worthy document for people to pay attention to. Now, coming to the question of poverty, and you and I have disagreed on this concept. I don't care. I'm like Ravi. I don't care what the World Bank thinks. I studied World Bank data and they're always flawed. Whether I studied them for 5 years and 10 years, and I taught research over the years and know that they are flawed, especially when it comes to developing countries. And I can tell you that without equivocation. I just want to be emphatic on that point. Too much emphasis is being placed on what the World Bank says. The World Bank has created more poverty in the world, whether one wants to believe that or not. All you have to do is to read the Nobel laureate economists for the past 20 years, and you will see that is a proven fact. Now, in the Guyanese situation, what that data does not take into consideration, and what Mr. Singh and Ravi had talked about, is the economic transformation that took place almost instantly with the discovery of oil, and also with the kind of policies that it required to make improvements in this country. There is no country on this planet that has resolved the problems of poverty. Poverty exists, but one reason I am proud of the PPP government is that they want to bring the people out of poverty to dignity. And the only way you can bring the people out of poverty to dignity is to lead them through the process of a rapid economic transformation. The developments that are taking place would not be realized, or is not being realized, as bringing dividends to the population at this point in time, because we are all looking for immediate gratification. But in a few years, as one of my student who didn't finish high school, he said, "Teach, I didn't go far in school, but I gave my children an education, and today all of them thankful that the PPP has given free education even in the local areas in high schools, that my children, all of them today can achieve some level of success in what they are doing, and nothing brings more happiness to my wife and I because of that achievement." So we have to look at the generational benefits. And and if people look back, and the PPP has to do a better job of this, that intergenerational wealth has to be developed first. Poor parents cannot transfer poverty to their children. Poor parents cannot transfer wealth to their children when the only thing they have is poverty. But the government is trying to make that a reality, make wealth a reality. But you have to seize the moment and the opportunities that are provided. And
All
it is that transformation that we do not take into consideration when we assess poverty.
all right, Dr. Ganga.
Yes, well, wish to rejoin with the old manifesto 2020 to 2024 25. There is continuity in terms of the new manifesto, and this reflects the sectoral successes that we have witnessed in the transformation of the various sectors. What I would add and what I would like to see is a solid 5 year development plan that emphasizes labor training by sectors and an immigration policy. When it comes to poverty reduction, for it to be sustainable, It has to be driven by policies. And I think the manifesto has provisions for various policies to address poverty. So I'm very optimistic with the new manifesto that if they have the labor training, immigration policy, and policies that reduce policy that reduce poverty, social policies. We're strong on economic policies, but we have to develop more socially oriented policies that would take us out permanently out of poverty. And I think poverty has been reduced. I think Dr. Tara has more valid data than the World Bank and so on. And those data shows that poverty has been subsided and has reduced substantially in Guyana. So those are my closing comments.
All
Thank
right. All right. Thank you, Dr. Dung. We'll ask everyone of you for 1 minute closing because we are past program time. But I just want to say in relation to the development plan, the PP argue that they do have development plan. They often refer to the National Development Strategy of 1995-96, the competitive strategy with the develop the poverty reduction program and the revision plus the LCD 2030. So those are the four most important documents that guide their development in the country. But whether they should get in one coherent document is another matter. And I think it would be useful if they can do that in one document. But anyhow, let's go to Raviji, your 1 minute closing statement.
Yeah, I'd like to emphasize that the PPP, to my great delight, does not mention the word poverty reduction. They talk of wealth creation.
Appreciate.
And this is a tremendous shift in Guyanese thinking. My father, like I said, worked on the sugar estate, and we never ever talked about us being poor. You look at what opportunities are out there, you qualify yourself for seizing those opportunities, whether slim or not, and you then take them and you pull yourself up by your bootstrap. Fortuitously, oil has presented us with a situation where the opportunities abound. And in the PPP's manifesto, to develop what Komal said, it is a very strategic plan where in every sector, whether in economic, we break down, opening up our interior savannas into new products like millet and soya and corn, which will make us self-sufficient in dairy and other poultry production. When you look at using our energy feedstock of natural gas to not only fuel power, but to be the basis for creating urea and for other products that come out of natural gas, that will be the beginning of us understanding that we can now be a manufacturing country. When you're talking of all the other institutions that are being formed to open up our eyes, I think it's great. Coming back to the social nights, like I said, my daughter is a doctor in the system, and the 12 hospitals, brand new ones that are fully equipped to take advantage of those new skilled people. Excites her. I want to repeat that. She just participated in the heart surgery for babies, for young babies. And she was so thrilled that the government could introduce these programs, to upgrade the skills of local Guyanese. She just came back from McMaster's with a program that this government had initiated to McMaster's in training to a higher level of doctors. I want to just use that example, and I'm using it because these are real examples, and you can just extrapolate that if you're here, if you are honest, that the sons and daughters of cane cutters don't have to be ashamed anymore. The opportunities are there. It all has to do with this attitude rather than talking about poverty and you're being held back. What is more that you have 30 more and empowering, and you have 32 gold scholarships on every subject on planet Earth? Thank you.
All right. Professor Narayan, your 1 minute
Yeah,
closing.
yeah. I think that the PVP is doing a very good job, and it is linking its current initiatives into the future and to the benefits that it will bring the Guyanese people. And the point I want to emphasize here is that it is the awareness that Guyana is a heterogeneous society, and the differences, the racial ethnic differences, takes time to be bridged. But the one overarching thing is the commonality of success for all. And so once the opportunities are there, and which the PPP is already trying to bring up, to make known to the people, because sometimes it is very difficult. As we know, changes in the material aspect of life happens much more readily than the cultural changes, than in the belief systems of people. So that will take time, and that is exploitable. It is the customary way of life that is exploitable. And I think that the PPP will succeed in bridging that divide, not only to bring the culture, the country into a cultural fusion, but also in terms of the economic success for all citizens.
Thank you, Professor Dr. Ganga.
I'm very impressed with the new manifesto in terms of infrastructure services. The purpose of infrastructure is to lower people's cost. And in this regard, I see community roads. We need to pay attention from home to the job. As Ravi mentioned, there is the outstanding bridge that will help to do that. Then there is mention of public spaces. The public space, we need to keep that in government ownership and not to privatize it. So from Houston, Pontrench Dam, all the way to Timeri, we should look at it again as a public use space, and then consider future mass transportation. Alongside that, the manufacturing of vessels in Guyana, like we had the old Sprostons, we used to make boats and so on. We need to look at those Malalis and see how they were made, and go back on that track and uh, and manufacture vessels in Guyana. So again, I would just say that we need to look at the labor requirements, plus immigration, that would fuel these initiatives, especially in the generation of services, infrastructural services that lower people's cost. That's the essential purpose of the infrastructure, to lower people's costs. So thank you, Dr.
All
Tyra.
right. Thank you, Dr. Ganga. Mr. Komal Singh, your
Yeah, Doc.
final words.
Even though you left me at last, so you might give me an extra minute. But no, look, Guyana is at a crossroad right now where our people have an opportunity of a lifetime. This election is a very, very important election for our country. Over the last 5 years, the private sector have invested in excess of 3 billion US dollar. This is outside of the major oil and gas investments in this country. Those investments over the last 5 years were pretty much done in terms of building out these infrastructure and these businesses. So for the next 5 years, you will see these businesses start generating revenue to pay for those investments. And for that, it was very important of the government to make sure that whatever and wherever we are today, their plans for the next 5 years is one of continuity. So when the private sector saw that, they were very elated because we recognize also that the government have created an enabling environment for the private sector to grow. And they have not just left us halfway. They created a system to make sure that those system continues forward. For people, I think the job creation that we have seen over the last 5 years, government, private sector have created in excess of over 80,000 jobs in this country. Yet we still have a shortage of employment. And Ravi alluded to earlier, you can't find a carpenter easily in this country. You're trying to find a work, it's difficult. And when we talk about poverty, I mean, for me, there's no poverty. People can get themselves out of that situation where very easily now. There's so much employment opportunity in this country that no one should be out of a job. I know a lot of people had an issue with me making that statement. I continue to make that statement. And I'm very positive about it that, no one should be out of a job in this country. There's enough employment opportunity created between government and the private sector over the last 5 years. You listen to President Ali recently, you recognize the amount of rollout work that he's planning from a government side also. That by itself is going to create a whole host of employment opportunity more. So it's going to be very important going forward. We continue the training that is taking place both from a government side and private sector to make sure our population who are not properly trained and have the requisite skill set, we continue to bring them on board and have them trained to make sure that they are ready and prepared for the opportunities that continues to unfold in this country. I think without say, the governments have done an extremely good job over the last 5 years in managing this economy. They have proven that they have the competence to manage and take us to where we want to be, to bring Guyana into an environment where we can be that breadbasket of the Caribbean, and we will be able to be a center point where we create an environment where we can have significant amount of growth in almost every single sector that we have seen also over the last 5 years. For that, I think, we as Guyanese should capitalize on these opportunities. We should be very smart in what we do come September the 1st. We should make sure we vote in a very wise manner to make sure that our country does not go backward, but continues to go forward. And for that, Doc, if you permit me, I will say right now that, President Ali has worked very hard over the 5 years, and you have earned the position and you have earned the respect of Guyana to go for our next 5 year terms as leading this nation in a path where every single Guyanese is going to benefit in all the wealth that is being created in this country. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, the government is putting in great emphasis on training. Apart from the University of Guyana, they have already offered over 39,000 scholarships, plus over 13,000 people were trained through the Ministry of Education Tibet program and the Board of Industrial Training program, which is expanding. Plus, Exxon also have this training facility in Berbice,
Mhm.
and I think Guys Suko training facility is still operational as well. So they are indeed putting, and they're trying to rework the current curriculum of schools and the university to make it more compatible with the government, with the development trusts of the country. So once again, I want to thank you all for this very interesting conversation. There are so many other things we could talk about, but time we have already gone over 20 minutes, 25 minutes of program time. So I want to thank you all. Thank you, Professor Narayan Prasad, Dr. Ganga Ramdas, Raviji, and Mr. Komal Singh. Um, until next week, have a wonderful weekend. And we have an interesting week coming up now. And I'm looking forward to the opening of the bridge. As you told me, it will definitely open by August, before the end of August. Minister Edghill confirmed that today.
The last pour is happening on the 25th of August.
Well,
Mhm.
we can't drive across, Tara. We got at least 10 days. I think at least 10 days to drive
Okay.
They're,
across.
they're not.
Pure, the
Uh,
thing got to
uh,
pure.
uh,
You got to pure
are they doing load
testing.
testing? Uh,
Uh,
Well,
Doc, as it relates to load testing is pretty much a methodology that is being used to move it. You have live load running on the bridge and you kind of monitor it. over because they're working on the bridge to build the other